All right, so thanks again for joining us tonight. This is our last recruitment session. We'll be holding some office hours later this month, but hope we can answer some questions that you have today, and just know that this is never the last time to ask your questions as well. I think it always helps just to start with kind of the big overview and talk about sort of who we are and what our overall mission is. And as you can see in the text here, that really our goal is about equipping students so that they have skills, but also a commitment to work with underserved populations, not just during this kind of fellowship year, but really beyond that time. And so our job is really to develop whom we think are the future leaders who are going to address health equity issues for years to come. And so we do that through this one-year fellowship. And so I always like to say that we sort of have an unstated mission also, which is obviously to, do right by the communities who host us and graciously let us come in and do projects with their organizations. And so I'll describe some of the projects that you see listed here in just a minute. And so my goal for tonight would just be that by the time you leave tonight, that you sort of have a better vision of sort of what you could do as a fellow, and maybe just a certain amount of excitement about the potential for this next year. So obviously you are here tonight because you're interested in learning about becoming a fellow. I know I recognize some names, and so I've connected with some of you, but maybe not everyone. And so if I do not already have your contact information, I'm going to ask either now or later in the presentation for you to scan that step 2 of the QR code. And it's going to take you to a Google form where you can share your name and email address in school, just some basic contact information so that we can stay in touch. So again, tonight, we'll give a quick overview of kind of when, where, how the project takes place, because I know that's maybe one of the main things that's on your mind. We'll talk about the application process and other requirements. And then common questions that we often get are related to the time commitment and just how fellows balance that with demanding school and work and family obligations. And then I know COVID is still obviously kind of this ever-present thing. And so trying to figure out how does that impact what is typically a direct service experience. And then I always like to just open up the floor and let our fellows share advice that they have, or, you to ask questions. So if I didn't say it before, please at any point feel free to drop a question in chat, or even just unmute yourself and ask a question that's just meant to be informal. Excuse me. Right. So I will start, and Margaret, if you can help me actually keep an eye on the chat too. Even having 2 screens, sometimes it's hard to make sure I've caught everyone.
Of course, so far everyone's introduced themselves, so nice to meet everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like we've got nursing, public health, social work, even dietetics represented. So that's exciting. And I think as we talk later sort of about the benefits of the fellowship, this is certainly something that we like to point out is, the fellowship's one of the unique things is that it's one of the only places where you really get to be in this really interdisciplinary setting with students who have similar interests and yet are approaching these topics from different angles. And so it can be, I think, really rewarding to meet people across disciplines. But obviously, one of the biggest questions you're asking, depending on your level of familiarity with the fellowship, is like, what do students in ASF do? And so I like to say that there's sort of 3 components, where the service project is obviously sort of forefront of everyone's mind, and it's obviously also one of the largest time commitments. But I want to also point out the educational workshops and then how we use reflection. And the reason why I think these 3 components are all equally important is there's actually been some research that shows in certain clinical domains, students lose empathy throughout their their schooling, like in their training process, empathy decreases. And obviously we don't want to be producing doctors or nurses or other, clinicians who are losing the ability to empathize with their patients. Fortunately, some other research tells us that having earlier experiences interacting with patients, being able to see a patient's point of view, and then having opportunities to reflect on what you're experiencing are three kind of ways that we can buffer against that empathy erosion. So educational workshops are one of the ways where we kind of learn about people's point of view. We oftentimes bring in leaders from community organizations and people who are in the field to teach us about things like understanding the impacts of the social determinants of health, or being able to identify issues of health inequities. We also have learning objectives that are more related to the projects themselves. So things like project planning and implementation and evaluation strategies, quality improvement, things of that nature. And then there's also core competencies related to self-care, because again, our goal is not to have this 1-year experience, but where you're prepared for a career in fields that are going to be challenging, and we want to equip you to be able to do that for the long run. So we will start off our year, and I'll show you in more detail later, but there will be a blended approach for learning where we'll do some things kind of independently through some online modules. Then there will be a group orientation retreat. So I will point out this weekend now and in the future, April 30th through May 1st. This is an important date. That is the only date right now that is set in stone. We will have flexibility to change our meeting calendar for other meetings, but that one we just have to kind of pre-identify. So please make sure you could attend April 30th through May 1st. After the orientation retreat, we would have quarterly weekend, just like Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon retreats. And then between the retreats, we'll hold monthly meetings, and those will be on weeknights, on like rotating weeknights. And then I mentioned reflection. So there will always be someone, from ASF who is available to read your reports, provide feedback, sort of help you think through how you process the experiences that you're having and how you can learn from them to be a better practitioner and to help you problem solve. And then there's obviously the service project. So some of the things that we want to make sure you walk away today knowing is that the project does require at least 200 hours of service. We, and I say we like globally, ASF nationally, emphasize direct service, and that can look very different. But the point, I guess, being that this is not a research fellowship, that this really is about trying to figure out ways that we can serve clients or organizations, and we try to do it very collaboratively. So when we get into sort of advice that we have later, you'll probably hear us talk about this idea of like, how do you select a topic? How do you identify sort of what your goals are for the project? And a lot of it comes back to this question of like, how do we involve our partners in making those decisions with us to make sure it's a benefit to them? Right. So I can get my slides to move here. All right, so I told you I would give some examples of projects. So oftentimes projects, so fellows can apply with a variety of project ideas, but one thing that I've noticed over our 6 years is that there are some common themes that keep coming up. And so we have recognized that, I guess, like improving mental well-being, increasing access to care, developing the potential of youth, and improving nutrition are 4 common domains. So you're welcome to apply with a project outside of those areas. But to give you some examples, again, we've had students who've worked with creating or coming alongside existing support groups for caregivers to try to increase their own decrease their stress and increase their well-being. That's one of the pictures you see in the top left. Top right are two students who are trying to increase access to care specifically for HIV and STI testing. And they helped an organization create a mobile testing unit. And they use like GIS technology to try to figure out what areas of the county were maybe underrepresented in terms of testing access, and then to try venues where they could go out and make testing available. Bottom right is a high school mentoring program that was specifically targeting students who thought they were interested in healthcare careers, but maybe lacked exposure to know like the variety of healthcare careers that were available to them. So David created a program at Carver High School that taught some hands-on things, but then it was also much about like ACT preparation and resume, writing and things of that nature as well. And then bottom left, again, related to nutrition, we've had programs working in after-school settings or school-based settings, trying to get youth exposed to a variety of healthy foods. And this program was even using gardening as the mechanism to kind of help them learn and be involved in the process of growing their food as well. But I will point back to this slide over on step 3. That's going to take you to our news page. You can read more in-depth stories about some of our fellows and what they've done. And if you scroll all the way down to like June, we do an annual report each June after our fellowship class wraps up. And it gives kind of a synopsis of all the projects from that year and kind of what they accomplished. And then the last thing I'll point to, if you just want to look at all 80-something examples, we have them cataloged on our website. The current fellows profiles will kind of be more prospective, like what they're working on. The alumni profiles should actually give you a look back, so what they were able to accomplish in their year. And so overall, I definitely just highly recommend you take a look there. There isn't a great way to search the website, unfortunately, but you can kind of scan through and see if you identify with any of them. And I will say our fellows, or our fellows for life, are very open and willing to talk usually. So if there's someone's project who jumps out at you, let me know, because it's likely that they would be willing to answer questions and give you advice as well. So speaking of fellows, Shan was planning to join us tonight, but is not feeling well. So I told her I could just kind of quickly give an example of her project so that you would see the breadth of things that sometimes can be done through the fellowship. And then I'm going to let Margaret introduce herself and take it from there. But so Shan is a public health doctoral student. Excuse me. She approached the fellowship with a background in doing financial literacy work with other nonprofits in a prior state, and her background was in social work. And so she knew that she wanted to work with youth in developing financial health. And so we were able to connect her with a local residential program called Grace House Ministries. They work with youth who are in foster care, girls, I think specifically, who are obviously, they're trying to equip them to transition to independent living. And so a lot of the girls that she's working with are kind of in that like 10 to 18 age range. And they have been doing group and individual based workshops so that they can learn about, money management and all of the things that are necessary in order to be financially independent. So that is, I think, a really neat program. There was something I read recently, and I wish I could quickly find and share the link, but I think it's a great example of why projects like this are really important, and why when I say we encourage students to think about not only clinical and kind of health related projects, but also those addressing the social determinants of health. And so Shan's project, I think, is a great example of that. And there was recently this article that talked about how those who had experienced financial distress by a certain point in life were more likely to develop psychiatric disorders later in life. And so anyway, I think it's just, again, one of many illustrations we have of how factors such as, poverty and financial well-being can impact people's physical health as well, or mental health later in life. And so anyway, that is one of our current fellows. And again, I'm sorry that she couldn't be with us tonight, but we do have Margaret. So Margaret, you want to just tell people about your project?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Margaret. I am part of a partner project with another fellow. His name is Malik Seals, and we kind of met in undergrad actually, and we're pretty much kind of like wanting to do our own projects, but then we just decided it would be better if we combined our efforts. And so we kind of decided to work with the elderly, the older population, because a big problem as you age is depression. And a lot of that is linked to loneliness, being alone all the time. And that was really made evident during the pandemic. And of course, I don't know if any of you guys have tried to teach your grandparents how to use modern apps or technology or iPad phones, but it can get really difficult. And some of these people just don't have family members close enough to go ahead and get them started and teach them how to use certain communication platforms like Zoom or FaceTime or WhatsApp, and even other just chat apps where people can come together. And so anyway, Malik kind of is the one who spearheaded the project and was like, well, let's find an older community and see if this is something they would be interested. And so he did a really good job identifying a need, which we'll talk about later in the session. And so now I'm over here just getting 20 participants and going ahead and every single week teaching them a new platform or a new way to use their technology. That way, eventually they can utilize it to stay not only in contact with their family members, but also they can join certain 55 plus groups that meet over Zoom. And so it's just really a way to fight this loneliness by getting them access to their family members and friends and just people who have maybe similar interests as them. And so we're also kind of taking it a step further, and we're hoping that we can, by doing pre and post assessment, we're hoping that we can see that people who experience increased social isolation, there'll be some sort of correlation with the fact that they can't use the technology as well. And so we're hoping by teaching them more about technology, they'll be able to utilize it and kind of just feel a little bit more connected to the world. So I know that was a lot, but it's really exciting. And if you have anyone you know that's interested in learning about this, just send them our way. Oh, guys, this is me too. Okay, so a big part of being in this fellowship is you really do get to network with amazing people. And so not only are you going to identify a mentor at your community site or within your community partner, but you'll also have an academic mentor that's just kind of helping your project go along, because a big part of ASF is, again, to find data-driven need. So be able to find some reports that show you, hey, this is an area where we know we have research backing up that this is a need. And so anyway, your academic mentor will guide you as you work with your community site mentor to build and implement the project. So it's like really exciting because you meet people that you may not have been able to interact with before, and you just develop really close relationships. And as we know, networking is a big part of so like becoming an adult and just finding, I don't know, just sorry. I guess what I mean is it's a great way to just increase that network, and a lot of benefits go along with knowing people in this area of expertise you're pursuing. And then, of course, you do get $2,500 as part of your work. and you get different payments as you go through different steps along the fellowship, and that's always a major plus. And then one of my favorite parts about ASF is we have national meeting webinars where we get to hear from a really well-informed speaker about something going on, or something that needs attention, or even just something that we need to work on as fellows. So it's a really great way, again, to meet people. And I even have been in contact with fellows from North Carolina. And so it's just like a really, ASF is just an amazing organization to be a part of, and you will learn a lot by being here.
So in terms of qualifying, just make sure everyone here can apply for this current cohort. So we are accepting applications up until February 1st, and that's for the group that would run March of 2020. What year is this now? 2022 until April 2023. It's weird to say those dates, isn't it? You can be enrolled part or full-time, that does not matter, but just some form of, graduate school education. And I know with the increasing number of online programs, we oftentimes hear from students who may be geographically living somewhere outside, but, going to school in one of our partner institutions. So I do want to just point out also that the service project needs to take place in Alabama. So students can technically live outside the state, but I always like to talk to people one-on-one if they are in this situation, just to help you weigh out the pros and cons, because we would need to make sure that you could do your service with a partner in Alabama, and that you'd be able to travel to Alabama for our, quarterly retreats. Including that orientation, whose date you see here again. Let's see, anything else? I think that was all I wanted to emphasize there. So in terms of project ideas, I will say, this is one of the favorite parts of my job, is talking to prospective applicants and sort of helping you think through what potential opportunities are out there for you in light of sort of your own interest, and then trying to match those maybe with community agencies where I've heard of, work that they're doing and opportunities to be involved. So we do encourage, people to kind of think about these steps, like where are the needs, where are your interests, and then it could even be related to a skill that you have outside of academics. So that's another thing I'll throw out there. We have had applicants who maybe were studying epidemiology, but they realized that, they had a gift for art, and they really wanted to use art as a way to connect with individuals and improve their health. So don't feel like you're restricted just to the discipline that you're studying or something that's clinical in nature. We've also had, fellows who maybe were in dentistry, but were really passionate about nutrition, and so we are open to you kind of stretching beyond your disciplinary boundaries for sure. And then the other thing I'll say is, just in terms of projects, while we've always traditionally emphasized projects that do serve participants in a face-to-face direct service manner, we've always had those that are more about capacity building for an organization. And the best way I can define that is it's usually about helping an organization's staff or volunteers be better prepared to serve their own clients. So we've had people, for instance, work with a shelter to do kind of tasks that were going to be necessary for them to start a child care center. So they were not working directly with the parents on their parenting skills. They were not, working with the infants on, socialization and motor development or anything of that nature. They were doing some of the baseline work that it was going to take to even prepare to open that facility. And I could give many other kind of examples of that, but just to say, you can think broadly in those terms as well. And I have been talking to community partners and just trying to get a sense of where they see potential for a fellow to come alongside their work. we always try to emphasize both to applicants and to partners that, we put some parameters on what y'all are doing. We want you to either be expanding something that already exists or creating something new. And so what that means is that we don't want you just being slotted into a general volunteer role. And the reason that I guess, qualification exists is because we want you to learn these skills in project development. And that'll only happen if you're kind of helping them, again, expand something or create something new. So that's what I would say in terms of the parameters. But Margaret, do you have anything to add just based on your experience?
Yeah, I would love to. I actually decided to apply for ASF 2 days before the application was due. And so it's just really impressive to see you three here a month in advance already starting to think about your project. And I think it's just a really great idea that if you have a mentor already in your life, maybe a professor or just someone who, you've developed a certain skill with, to maybe talk to them about joining this organization and about some potential projects, because it really is hard when you have a lot of interest to narrow down this one area. And I really like the slide because it kind of shows you step by step what you need to be thinking about. And I think I did each of these steps with a different idea, instead of just having this one cohesive project in mind. I kind of was like, oh, well, I feel like there's a need in women's health for step one, but I'm really interested in exercise. Because I was a swim coach, so that kind of combines 2 and 3. And so I was just way too broad with it. But if you find a way to kind of balance something that you're really interested in, but also where you've identified a need, then I think you've just hit this beautiful point where your project is really going to grow because you want to invest time in it. And also people want you to invest time in this because there's a disparity or there's a population that really needs you to create or expand on this program. And so anyway, like I said, a little bit about my story. I started really broad, I applied the day before. And so I had all these ideas for my project in mind. And I think I just tried to make it too narrow. But when I finally decided to talk to some of my fellows, I realized that Malik, my now partner, was also kind of struggling with certain parts of his project. And so we could both combine our strengths, we would really get our project going. And so, like I said, find a need, but that also is based off an interest. And I think it's really cool, Brooke, that not only are you in nursing school, but you're also a registered dietitian. So you've got a lot of cool potential projects. And then Venus, you already know that you're interested in women's health. So by already thinking about these things, you're starting way ahead than where I was at. And that's really exciting for the next cohort of fellows, because I think you guys are going to do great things.
Yeah, I have a lot of broad interests. So I'm
yes. And we can definitely talk about narrowing them down because I've gotten a little better at that. But maybe, Grace, do you know some of the nursing students that are current fellows at Allbrook? Anyway, we could get you connected with them. They're on the website, but I think they would be really great people for you to connect with.
So I can certainly tell y'all time commitment wise, I mentioned 200 hours plus the meetings. And so, that's one thing I'll say, but I know usually I don't have the best perspective on time commitment. So I usually defer to the fellows. So Margaret, do you mind taking this one as well?
Yeah, so I really recommend 200 hours seems like a lot. And then if you try to divide it by the weeks you're a fellow, it comes out to 4 hours a week, but that's not how life works. You might have a crazy semester in the fall, and then just a kind of more lenient one in the spring, which is kind of my story. And so I've decided, I was okay, I'm going to do a lot of my direct service hours in the spring and do a lot of my planning and training in the fall. And so it's kind of, again, good to go ahead and start thinking about when you're going to fit these hours in. Do you like to do it maybe piece by piece, or do you want to do it block by block? And so kind of knowing that lets you make this really strong plan that you can follow. One suggestion that I kind of tell anyone when they have something important in their life, but maybe isn't as mandatory, say as a class or an interview, put it in the perspective that it is a class, it is a lab meeting, you have to be there. And so if you can somehow schedule a certain amount of hours every week or 2 times a week to work on your project or to do research for your project or meet with your mentors, you're going to be able to manage those 200 hours. It's going to seem much more manageable. And so, again, it seems like a lot, but when you divide it up into kind of stages of what you want to be doing with your project, you'll start seeing that it really does add up when you're spending this time trying to build the project. And then finally, once you have this really good not background, but framework for your project, then as you start doing your direct service, it just builds very quickly. And it gets really exciting as, you know, your hours go up. And so I think I don't even look at my indirect service hours anymore because I'm so much higher than 100, just because it's very easy to spend time learning and training and reading. And so, yes, you definitely have to think about this, but if you treat it like a class or a meeting, you will get it all done. And so, like I said, just start thinking about it beforehand. And again, a partner project is always such a great idea. That's kind of what Malik and I transitioned to, and we're very happy, especially since we're both in the same program at UAB for our master's degree and are both part of lab projects. So it's totally fine if you can find a partner that you seem to work well with and just really, you know, attack the project together.
And so we allow our partner projects to make a decision. Traditionally speaking, partner projects would share the work. And by that, I mean, they were both still expected to do 100 hours of direct service, but they could share the planning time. And so by virtue of that, it would be less than 200 hours they were committing. We have, though, noticed that partner projects oftentimes end up spending 200 hours a piece. And so, again, traditionally, we had been splitting the stipend between partner projects, and that just seemed unfair. And so we just ask now, like when partner projects, you know, begin, do you anticipate, like, are y'all doing this and you want to do fewer than 200 hours and potentially split the stipend, or are you both anticipating, you know, the full 200? All of this to say that we try to make the stipend commensurate, but it is a way that you can reduce some of the hour expectations by working with someone and just, you know, knowing from the outset that you're going to each try to do less than 200. But again, we also have tried to be very fair from ASF and not make you get a half stipend and you're doing 190 hours, right? So we've come up with kind of a gradated stipend so that you get kind of a fair compensation as well. But
Kristen, Venus had a question in the chat. One of them was about the stipend. The other one was, our partner projects developed after fellows are accepted. And so from what I remember, most of the time partners apply together, but was there also a place to select that you were interested in a partner project? I feel like you would probably know more about that.
Yeah, I know, that's a great question. So you can apply with a partner. So from the outset, you, if you go to our website where it says apply, if you notice that there are almost like 2 tabs, one's for like individual project, or it may just say like application and then partner project. The only big difference on the 2 applications is that the partner project allows you to enter like double the demographics, basically like 2 people's names and 2 people's schools. A partner can be from a different school, a different discipline, whatnot. And we have had projects, in fact, like between the UAB and Sanford, and between like pharmacy and nursing, or currently like medicine and dentistry. And I think those can be some really fruitful projects, in fact, but that's not required. In Margaret and Malik's case, they connected after the fellowship. And in fact, last year, we didn't let students apply as partners because we were starting earlier and they didn't have to have their project ideas as fully formed. And we just couldn't envision, like, why would 2 people who neither know what they want to do apply as a partner? And we realized that that was a mistake on our part because anyway, so long way of saying, if 2 people do enter the program as individuals, and then like, over time realize that they would be better served and could better serve their site by partnering, we would be totally open to that as well. So I think it could happen in either direction, but at this point, it is an opportunity before applying. And that's kind of traditional.
Yeah, and yes, and just be honest with yourself. Like if you think that a partner project would make you more willing to apply to ASF or just implement your project or just make it easier with your time commitment, with your schedule, then it's a great idea. And so just as long as you're maintaining that communication with Kristen, which is what I was doing, we were able to figure out that combining Malik and mine's project would be the best way to go.
So I'm going to jump ahead real quick and show you this slide, because I think this also touches on what Margaret was talking about in terms of sort of how it works after you're selected and how you continue to refine your project idea. Sorry for the text here, but essentially March, April, May are what I would consider sort of the planning months. So that is where you're going to better determine who your site is going to be. And you're going to do that by doing some research. You might do some stakeholder interviews. You may go and shadow or volunteer, whatever you need to do to sort of feel comfortable committing to a site partner and have them commit to you. Our aim will be to have a partner selected by, early April. Then you'll work with that partner and figure out like, what's the long-term goal for this project? And you'll come to orientation having kind of a written goal, and we'll workshop together and give you feedback on that goal statement, because that's going to be something that kind of guides you throughout the year. And then in the month of May, and into June, you'll be working on what we call a project plan. And this is just a more detailed kind of description of what activities you're going to do, kind of what dates or milestones you're hoping to achieve certain mile markers by, again, working towards that long-term goal. And so really March, April, May, even into June, most projects do not actually start implementing during that time frame. So I like to tell people by July, hopefully you are well positioned to actually start. And then March, April is when you're wrapping up. So when you look at it in this context, 13 months kind of shrinks really fast. And part of our planning process will be helping you determine like, what is a realistic goal that you can achieve between July and April of that year. So I skipped over this thing about COVID, and I'll just quickly say, we have moved to this blended approach. Hopefully we will continue to be able to do this. We follow school kind of guidelines. So if we notice that, COVID causes schools to start restricting in-person meetings, then we will follow suit. But our monthly meetings outside of retreats will likely be virtual anyway, or at least have a virtual option. I'll publish that schedule prior to you starting the program, so you can give me feedback as well. We are asking that if people are not vaccinated, that you would plan a project that could be done virtually or from a distance. I would anticipate that most people in, kind of the health profession fields have had to show proof of vaccination, for your own clinical experiences and whatnot, but just know that we will be asking for documentation of that. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing that, then we will work with you to plan a virtual or distanced project. And then the other thing that's kind of been a bright side to come out of COVID, like Margaret referred to, was we found ways to connect with other chapters. So Alabama is one of 13 chapters around the country, and I think you could anticipate having one or more meetings maybe co-hosted with another of our sites. So far we've primarily partnered with New Orleans and North Carolina and our New Hampshire, Vermont chapters, but we have the potential to connect with others as well. So apply by February 1. We will take about a week to review applications and then make offers to select candidates. They will interview on either February 22nd or 23rd. The plan had been to do those in person. We'll just have to see as we get a few weeks into this year to see whether or not we can continue to do those in person. And then we will be able to notify applicants by the end of February. And then I'm just trying to really emphasize, like, I want everyone to view this as like fellowship starts March 1, and we'll have, a time to kind of hit the ground running and do some things together again in preparation for our first in-person gathering, which will be April 30th through May 1st. Margaret, do you have anything to add, just what you remember from the interview process?
Well, you are put in a waiting room right before, and so maybe one of us will be there with you. Are we doing that again this year, Kristen? I remember.
Yeah, so there will either be like fellows in person while you're waiting or virtual waiting room.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyway, I really enjoyed that. But honestly, just go in ready to talk about your application, because they will ask you questions based off what you wrote. Honestly, that's pretty self-explanatory, but I can understand that it being a month apart, you might forget what you wrote. And so just make sure like you have a pretty good idea. And also whatever project you decide that is probably where you want to focus on, have some stats ready, because it's really good to see that you've already done some research into that really important part of ASF where it's data-driven need. And so if you have that kind of ready, you'll be able to kind of build your project and like what you want to talk about when you're there for the interview. But honestly, just be yourself. Everyone who is interviewing you is just very encouraging. And so, yes, if you're like me, you get stressed before any interview, but really just treat it like a conversation and you're going to do great.
All right, well, we've talked a lot, so I want us to stop talking and see what questions y'all have.
I don't really know if I'm going to word this right, but kind of what I'm thinking, like, I have a few different ideas that are not all related. So how would I know, like, if there's, even if it is like a data-driven need, like, how would I know that there would be a place or a site like available to do that, like in the Birmingham area?
Well, Kristen is so great connecting you with someone. And so it is kind of good if you, like, a lot of people who come in ready for a project, they might already have identified their community site or a mentor. And so that makes it a little easier because you kind of know your starting point. But if you're like me, Brooke, where you're just kind of like, I want to do this, but I don't know where to do it at, Kristen and other fellows will be really good resources in finding you someone to talk with. And I just remember my first conversation led me down, 3 tiers to another person. And so if you're willing to put in the work and find that, you're going to, but also it is nice when you kind of already have an idea of where you're going. I'm sure Kristen has more to add on that, but also it is great if you have multiple ideas, because in your application, you have room to put 2 ideas, at least you did last time. And so if, like I said, just communicating with Kristen is great because she can kind of guide you on which project seems to be best.
Yeah, so we do still on the application have places for you to propose 2 potential project ideas. And then we're also, one, I guess, difference from Margaret's application is we are asking people to identify like 1 or 2 potential partners. So we're not expecting that you have secured like a commitment from them, but we just want to know, like, have you gotten online and researched to see who? So Venus and I were actually meeting earlier today and talking about women's health. And, I unfortunately didn't have, I don't think, like the perfect organizations to recommend, but we could at least, talk about like, well, okay, this organization deals with domestic violence and trauma, or this organization deals with like maternal health and kind of birth outcomes, or so we could start to sort of brainstorm some potential ones. So I would love to, be a part of that conversation and just help you make a list of prospective organizations, and then you can go off and do some more research. And then just know that what you write on the application is not like set in stone, that March and April is that time frame where we want you, if you don't have a solidified partner coming in, that, we've got that time protected for you to finish that. And I'll tell y'all, like, we're kind of doing something here in Alabama different than how they do it elsewhere. So it's still a little messy, and I don't know what the right answer is. Everywhere else, they require you to apply like your partner, your idea, your goals, your activities you're going to do, like everything is supposed to be figured out before you apply. And we just decided we really wanted to come alongside applicants and really support them more in that process. So we're asking less on the front end in terms of the application, but it does still mean that the work still has to be done. It just happens in like March and April once you're selected as a fellow. So I would say those are busy months for sure. But I'm, there to be alongside you. And y'all are some of the first to hear this, but we are in the process of hiring someone who will be working with us part-time to be a coach, and will also be available. So anyway, there will be a team, an ASF team soon, and I'm sure that whoever this other coach will be equally excited about sort of supporting people and finding the right partner. Great question. Any other questions? Well, let me think if there's anything else I want to tell y'all. I think, it helps obviously hearing examples from current fellows. So if you want to hear from more people than Margaret and myself, I will just mention that we have recorded the prior sessions. And while most of the content is the same as what we presented tonight, obviously the fellows kind of telling their stories is unique. And so you can go to our YouTube channel and find those recordings there. So that's a great option. And then in terms of sort of access to me, I will be doing some office hours virtually on January 18th from like 12 to 5. And you're welcome just to drop in anytime. I'm also happy to just schedule a one-on-one meeting and talk separately as well. And then the last thing I'll point out is just our different social media channels. This is a great place just to hear more stories and kind of see, application deadline reminders and things of that nature. So I encourage you to follow us there. But if there aren't any other questions, I'll just say thank you again for coming tonight. And I look forward to staying in contact, and let me know how I can be of help.